Hey everyone, I wanted to do a video on benzodiazepine, withdrawal, tolerance, and life after. Now I know there's been a number of videos out there already done on this topic, and while some of them are very good, I would like to, just add another perspective on it and hopefully just add to the amount of research out there already on this topic. Benzodiazepine was first introduced in the 60s. It works on GABA, a neurotransmitter, prescribed as a muscle relaxant, an anti-seizure medication, as a sleep aid, and of course for anti-anxiety, or as an anti-anxiety medication. And sometimes it's even prescribed for depression. So benzos pretty much became prominent in the 1990s and early 2000s, though they're less prescribed these days. Antidepressants like SSRIs are now the first line of treatment. So that's just a little bit of background. Now let's talk about tolerance versus addiction. Now, tolerance just means you've taken the medicine long enough to where, there's been biological changes, in your brain, neurotransmitters that are now responding, and the medicine is no longer having the effect that it once had. So typically what they do is increase the medicine. And that works for a while, but typically what happens is you hit a wall, so to speak, and your doctor eventually will say, we can't give you any more. You're already taking too much. And at that point, things become a little more difficult because either you have to wean off the medicine, which is bound to bring side effects, let alone whatever you were taking it for is still going to be there and most likely more pronounced at this point. But it also brings implications of additional treatments. Like, we take you off the benzo, now do we give you an antidepressant, or do we try a different type of benzo, or where do we go from here? So a tolerance is different than addiction in that addiction is more associated with addictive behaviors. If you are tolerant to benzo, it's different than being addicted in that you're not stealing or going through crazy means to acquire it, and you're not taking it in excess to get high off of it. Things like that. It's just a very different phenomenon. So the next thing we could talk about is the AMA model, or the American Medical Association, versus the psychosocial behavioral or holistic model that you see in psychology in terms of disorder. Now, the AMA model sees disorder as being strictly a biological function, meaning if you have anxiety, it's a result of neurotransmitters and basically biological, neurological functioning within your body. In other words, this could stem from your birth, it could stem from prenatal development, even trauma can change neurochemistry. But either way, it's going to be looked at and examined through the lens of as a medical problem. Now, the psychosocial behavioral model, or the holistic model as it's often called, it looks at things like your cognitive and affective functioning. Essentially it's nurture. We can just use that debate, the nature versus nurture debate, right? So the medicine model, the medical model, is more the nature. They're looking at your biological, what you were born with, versus the psychological model is looking at how your environment affected you, how your experiences have affected you. They're taking into consideration other things. But also, the psychosocial behavioral model, there is a biological perspective going on in there as well. There's, at least today, at one point, the two were very different, the medical model and the holistic model. But now, psychology has really sort of spread their theoretical lens, so to speak, and they look at things from a biological perspective too. There's no denying that prenatal development and early fetal development, too much exposure to stress-related hormones and things like that can cause changes in development of the baby that will, as the child goes on to grow and become an adult eventually, these symptoms are correlated for sure. But that said, chemistry and our thoughts and behavior work as a continuum. They work in a influencing kind of style upon each other. Our chemistry influences our thoughts and our behavior, but our thoughts and behavior influence our chemistry. Meaning, if you think, even if you're healthy, and you didn't have any kind of predisposed biological anxiety or depression stemming from prenatal development or something like that, and we take you out of a good, loving environment, put you in a terrible environment, and put you in, a negative state of mind with negative emotions in a prolonged state, and eventually you will have biological changes to your chemistry. So you hear people say things like, and they hear this a lot from their psychiatrists, that, yeah, I have problems, but, it's biological, it's chemical, they say. Well, yeah, it's chemical, but everything's chemical. You got to look at it. First of all, we are a machine, machine's not the right word, an organism of chemistry. Everything we do, every emotion that we're feeling, and virtually every thought is a chain reaction of interplay between chemicals. Like that's what's happening there. So to say it's chemicals, I think what they're really saying is it's derived, or the genesis is strictly a biological thing. And with that said, biology can influence, and in a certain number of people, a very small percentage, some of them may need medicine. There's no denying that, especially people with severe depression, suicidal ideation, things like that. But for the majority of us, we can benefit from a mix of meds and holistic, or counseling, talk therapy, behavioral changes in life, things like that, that will sort of realign this continuum in our brain into a healthier state.
Hey everyone, I've just released my new book on benzo recovery called The Powers Manual, Benzo Recovery Guide. Many of you have asked for it, and finally I'm able to offer it to you. The Powers Manual encompasses everything I know about benzodiazepine dependence and recovery, stemming not only from my personal experience with benzo recovery, but combined with my knowledge as a soon-to-be licensed doctoral-level clinical psychologist. The therapeutic techniques and tools I use to make a full drug recovery are included in this book. The Powers Manual covers everything from symptoms management and taper plan to help with sleep, diet, exercise, and even uses cognitive behavioral techniques to address the pre-existing condition of anxiety and depression. Recovery is possible, but it will require us to fight, not flight.